Hi, everyone, and welcome to Brian's Horror Corner. I'm your host, Brian, and welcome to this Christmas horror movie review as part of my Christmas holiday horror movie series for the month of December here. So, we have reached the last of the Christmas related horror movies, anyway, for this series. Um, so, we're going to take a look at that one today and review it, and that is A Christmas Horror Story that I have on Blu ray here. A Gift of Holiday Cheer and Insane Bloody Violence. So, yeah, my version has I don't know if you can see that with the lighting, but a few special features here. So let's just go ahead and get into it. A Christmas horror story, starting with the setup, the premise, and then the cast, and then I'll get into my thoughts and review. Try to keep it spoiler free as much as I can. So, A Christmas Horror Story is a 2015 Canadian anthology horror film directed by Grant Harvey, Stephen Hoban, and Brett Sullivan. It premiered on July 20th, 2015 at Fantasia International Film Festival Fantasia, and had a limited theatrical release on October 2nd, 2015, along with a VOD release. The film is a series of interwoven stories tied together by a framework story featuring William Shatner as a radio DJ. So that's a pretty interesting premise right there on its own. So the plot begins with Dangerous Dan, played by William Shatner, who's an alcoholic radio DJ stuck pulling a long shift at the Bailey Downs radio station during Christmas. During this broadcast, he keeps receiving notices of a disturbance at a local mall, telling his listeners to stay away. Dan keeps playing his music while a series of four stories are witnessed. So I'm just going to kind of give the synopsis of each of the stories and go through them, not give too much away. So the first story involves three teenagers that go to their high school. I think it's their high school. They go to the high school basement where a year ago two other teens were killed down there. Used to be a convent, and um, so they're doing some investigating. They end up getting locked down there, and some things happen, and it kind of goes from there. This one has a pretty interesting twist. Not the best twist of all four stories, but definitely an interesting and unique twist for sure. The second story involves a kid that goes with his parents out into the woods. I think it's like private property, actually, somewhere they shouldn't go to get a Christmas tree. And the kid comes back and is a little different than they remember than he was before they went. So it kind of goes from there. And then the third story has to do with a family driving to visit their aunt. Um, and basically, they end up discovering the story of Krampus, whatever you'd like. And then they end up being pursued by him. That one has a really good and interesting twist as well. All these stories have their own twist to them in the end. Some work better than others. I'll get into that. And then the final story is the one where we go to the North Pole and we have Santa Claus preparing for Christmas, who ends up having to fight off his elves that kind of take a turn for the worst, and then ultimately has the showdown with Krampus towards the end. And that one has the best twist by far that ties into the whole movie. So that's about as much as I can give away without giving too much away. Cast wise, we have William Shatner, of course, as DJ Dangerous Dan. George Buzza as Santa Claus slash Norman. I think it's Buzza. Rob Archer as Krampus. Zoe Grand Mason as Molly Simon. Alex Azov Ozerov as Ben, Shannon Cook as Dylan, Amy Forsyth as Capris Bauer, Jeff Clark as Taylor, and Michelle Nolden as Diane Bauer. It's obviously a larger cast than that with all the stories and everything, but those are kind of the main cast members that I listed. So yeah, that's a Christmas horror story, a Christmas horror anthology. Movie, which, if you know my channel, you know I'm a big fan of horror anthology movies. So I hadn't actually watched this one before. I've had it for several months, I think like half the year actually, but I wanted to wait to watch it for Christmas for obvious reasons in the title. So overall, guys, I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was a really effective Christmas horror anthology movie. With one kind of significant con that I have, but it's really the only con that I have. So let's just go ahead and get into starting with the pros. And you got to start with we see Krampus in a couple of stories in this movie, and this is the Krampus that I want. The look of Krampus is awesome, especially when he's still not completely lit, but kind of in the dark and the shadows. This is a very big, bulky, beefy, evil looking Krampus, which is kind of what I wanted in the movie Krampus or Krampus. But of course, that was a PG-13 movie, so you kind of got a PG-13 view of him, where this was an R-rating movie. So yeah, he's just very scary and intimidating. He looks great. Really like the effects and the makeup on him. So that's the first thing that really stood out. From a technical standpoint, this movie is really good, especially from a lighting standpoint, to a camera work, shooting, and editing standpoint. And the editing part was very important. The way they put this movie together, going back and forth between the stories. I actually thought, even though that's, well, you'll see later, but I thought they did a really good job editing, and they needed to. It's a very well shot movie overall. Just looks great. Really enjoyed the effects, especially as they relate to Krampus, as I mentioned, as well as the kills and the blood and the gore, and mostly in the last story, but really throughout. Just very fun and effective. It's not disturbing gore, but just sort of fun and over the top kind of gore. Um, the overall production of this movie is really good. It feels much more like a bigger budget movie than it actually was. I believe it wasn't a huge budget movie, but it comes across like one. In speaking of that, I really enjoy the different settings in this movie as well, from the woodsy areas that they're in to the school basement to the North Pole. It just really looks and really like the look and the feel of all these different settings that they have within the movie. Also, the acting was really good across the board. Sometimes in these anthology movies, you get pretty uneven acting in different stories that are shot at different times and not necessarily related to each other. But in this movie, I didn't really see a false note anywhere, to be honest. I thought the acting was good across the board in all the stories. Believable performances that really helped to sell this, to really help to sell the stories that were going on. I'm thinking faster than I can speak here. Um, so yeah, and then another big pro is I actually liked all four of the separate stories in this. There really wasn't a dud in the bunch, which sometimes you tend to get to in these type of anthology movies. They were all interesting and unique in their own way, and they all had a good twist to them. Like I said, the twists varied. Some of them were, oh, okay, and some of them were like, you got to be kidding me. That's how I felt watching them anyway. So, yeah, just very good and interesting stories, different takes on Christmas, different Christmas themes. Um, my favorite was, like I think most people's, got to be the last one when we go to the North Pole and we have Santa and his elves, and ultimately the showdown that he has with the anti Santa, shall we say. That one was the best for a variety of reasons. The blood, the gore, the story twist, the look of Santa was also really good. That's something I didn't mention. George Buza, who plays Santa, does a phenomenal job. But the look of him is also, he looks more like a Viking, like an old school kind of Viking that you'd see as Santa. And that's really effective as well. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, that was definitely my favorite story of the four. Um, just great stuff in that one, from the gore to the twist to the look to the lighting, just everything about it. Very entertaining. I've got to talk about the Christmas atmosphere, like I do with all these movies, of course. This one has really good Christmas atmosphere, although some of the stories aren't quite as thick in Christmas. I would say the first story and the third story, Christmas is more or less mentioned, but you don't really see a whole lot having to do with Christmas, other than in the third story, we have the anti Santa Claus in it, obviously. But from an atmospheric and a visual standpoint, obviously, the wraparound with William Shatner has Christmas lights and more of a Christmas feel to it. And then the final story, of course, because it's in the North Pole with Santa and reindeer and elves, and so that's all about Christmas there. But we got some music. We got the mall. There's a mall scene at some point in the movie that I'm not going to give away. So Christmas is definitely here. It's not just a clever title. There's actually a lot of Christmas atmosphere and themes in this movie as well. Just not thick throughout from beginning to end, I would say. You got the North Pole, for crying out loud. Um, it's got snow as well, trees, obviously, lights, good Christmas feeling. Um, I love the final twist of the fourth story that ends up tying into the wraparound and therefore kind of ties into all the stories. I'm not going to say it's quite as good as Trick or Treat to me, but it's close. I mean, just a step down, I would say, in terms of how they tie everything together. Trick or Treat was legendary the way they did that movie. You're never going to get me to. It's going to be tough for another movie to top that, but they do a really good job here. And before that ending twist, I was kind of thinking to myself, well, these stories are kind of they're not really related, and plus they're playing them at the same time, going back and forth. I'm not sure I like that, but I liked it a little bit more once the final twist and the ending happened of them. It's just it was a twist that I really didn't see coming. I thought it was very effective. It just blew me away. Yeah, just love all the twists, but especially the final one that ties everything together. And then this movie, unlike the last movie I reviewed, is actually scary. There's actually scary parts to it. I mean, not a disturbingly scary movie, of course. It's more of a fun Christmas horror anthology scary, but it's very effective in that. So definitely some scary parts between visuals, some jump scares, just some images, effects. Yeah, just really good stuff. The acting's done really well with horror on their faces and stuff. So yeah, those are all my pros, guys, for this movie. The only con I have, and I've kind of mentioned it a little bit, is I don't know that it was the best way to do this movie by having all four stories play at the same time where they cut back and forth between all four stories. They don't go in order. It's not like one, two, three, four, go back to one, then two, three, four, go back to. They kind of jump around in all of them at the same time, cutting back and forth. And I thought it threw the pacing of the movie off a little bit, and it also caused some slow parts and some lulls in the middle of all these stories because they kind of all play them at the same time. So you get the beginning, the setup, and then you get the ending, which are good. But in the middle, there's just kind of some filler and some boring things going on. It dragged a bit. I don't, even though you could say this is an interwoven anthology, it's obviously not as interwoven or as good as Trick or Treat, as I mentioned before. Although it is more so at the end, as I mentioned. But because it's not as interwoven like all the stories, it's not as effective of technique to shoot it the way that they did. Where I almost think that even if they didn't want to shoot like one story, go to the wraparound, second story, go to the wraparound, like you get in a lot of anthology movies. I thought maybe they should have changed it up to where they played different parts of the different stories at the same time. So, in other words, when you're at the middle of one story, you're at the end of the other. So it kind of like what's the word for you kind of taper it a little bit like one starts and plays more of it, then you go to the second one, you just play a little bit of it, and then so that basically you don't have any slow parts like when like I said when one part's in it's sort of its lull or its middle part of the story, you're getting the ending of another story and then maybe the beginning of another. I just thought they layered. I think that's the way to say it. I thought they could have layered these stories a little bit better, but that's really my only con for this movie, guys. For a Christmas horror anthology movie, it really worked for me in just about every other way, from the acting to the visuals to the look, the production, the camera work, the gore, the scares, just kind of everything about it. There's good tension. Even in the other stories that I didn't mention, the fourth story I mentioned, mostly gore and stuff. The other ones have good tensions, good jump scares that are effective. So yeah, overall, guys, this is just a really great movie in my opinion. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 as far as the rating goes. I really enjoyed A Christmas Horror Story as a first time watch from 2015. Go ahead and comment down below if you guys have seen this, what you thought, what your thoughts are about it, pros and cons. If you haven't seen it, I definitely would recommend watching it, especially right now, this time of the year, obviously. Um, Please like this video, hit the little notification bell below so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos with this series. I still have one movie to review, which is not Christmas related, but winter related, which I'll be doing just before New Year's, about a week from now. Please subscribe to my channel so you don't miss that, any of my great horror content, but including what I have coming up the first 2 months of 2022 already. And I'll have a video on that. But thank you for watching this review. I hope everybody that celebrates it has a Merry Christmas. But stay scared. Bye.